The day she stopped crying did not begin with strength. It began with silence. A silence so deep it felt heavier than the sadness she had carried for years. For a long time, everyone in the small town believed they knew her story. They believed she was the quiet girl who always kept her head down, the girl who never argued, never fought back, never raised her voice. But what they didn't see was the storm she had been surviving inside. Her name was Amina, and for most of her life, tears had been her closest companion. They came in the morning when she woke up and remembered the weight of another day. They came in the afternoon when someone laughed at her dreams. They came in the evening when she sat by the small window in her room, wondering why life seemed so much harder for her than for everyone else. Amina had once been a hopeful child. She used to run through dusty streets with bright eyes and a heart full of dreams. She believed that hard work could change everything. She believed kindness would always be rewarded. She believed that people who tried their best would eventually succeed. But as the years passed, life slowly chipped away at those beliefs. Her father lost his job when she was still young, and the family struggled to survive. Bills piled up like mountains, and the stress in the house grew heavier every day. Her mother tried to stay strong, but the worry in her eyes never faded. Amina watched it all silently, learning at a young age that life could be cruel even to people who did nothing wrong. At school, things were not much better. While other students laughed and made plans for their future, Amina often felt like an outsider. Her clothes were simple. Her lunch was sometimes just bread. Some classmates whispered behind her back, calling her poor, calling her weak, calling her someone who would never become anything important. At first, she tried to ignore them. She told herself that their words didn't matter. But words have a strange way of slipping into the heart, especially when they are repeated every day. Slowly, doubt began to grow inside her. The dreams she once held so tightly started to feel unrealistic. Whenever something went wrong, she cried. Not loudly, not in front of people. Amina was careful about that. She cried in private places. In the bathroom at school. In the corner of her room late at night. Behind the old tree near her house where no one would see her. Crying became her escape. It was the only way she knew how to release the pain that had no other outlet. Some nights she cried until she fell asleep, her pillow wet with tears and her heart heavy with questions she couldn't answer. Years passed this way, and the world continued to test her. When she graduated from school, she hoped things would finally change. She applied for jobs with determination, believing that once she started working, she could help her family and rebuild her confidence. But rejection after rejection came like waves crashing against fragile hope. Some employers barely glanced at her application before turning her away. Others told her she didn't have enough experience. A few didn't even bother to respond. Each rejection felt like another door closing in her face. And each night, the tears returned. Her mother would sometimes notice her red eyes and ask softly if something was wrong. Amina would smile and say she was just tired. She didn't want to add more worry to the family's already heavy burden. Inside, though, the sadness was growing. The girl who once believed in endless possibilities now wondered if her life would ever move forward. One evening, after another unsuccessful day of job searching, Amina walked slowly back home. The sky was turning orange as the sun prepared to disappear behind the hills. People were returning from work, shops were closing, and laughter echoed through the streets. She felt invisible among them. When she reached her room, she sat by the window and stared at the fading light. Her chest felt tight with frustration. Once again, tears filled her eyes. But something about that evening was different. As the tears rolled down her cheeks, she suddenly felt exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. It felt as if she had spent years pouring out pain without ever changing the story of her life. She looked at her reflection in the glass of the window. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, her shoulders slumped under the weight of disappointment. And for the first time, a thought crossed her mind. What if crying wasn't helping anymore? The question lingered in the air like a quiet challenge. Amina wiped her tears slowly. She realized something important in that moment. Crying had become a habit, a reaction she turned to whenever life hurt. But habits can trap a person in the same place for years. She whispered to herself, what if I tried something different? It wasn't a dramatic moment. There was no sudden music, no thunder in the sky. Just a quiet decision forming inside a tired heart. That night, for the first time in a long while, she didn't cry herself to sleep. Instead, she sat at her small desk and began writing down everything she wished she could change about her life. The list was long. She wanted confidence. She wanted independence. She wanted to help her family. She wanted to prove that the girl people underestimated could rise higher than anyone expected. As she looked at the list, another realization appeared. No one else was going to change her life for her. The next morning, Amina woke up with a strange feeling. The problems were still there. The financial struggles hadn't disappeared. The world hadn't suddenly become easier. But something inside her had shifted. Instead of waiting for opportunity, she decided to create it. She began learning new skills online using free resources. Every day she studied for hours, even when it felt difficult. She practiced writing, communication, and digital skills that could help her find work in the modern world. Some days were frustrating. Some lessons felt impossible to understand. But each time she wanted to give up, she remembered the girl in the window who had asked, "What if I tried something different?" Slowly, progress appeared. Weeks turned into months. Her confidence grew little by little. She started applying for freelance work online, offering small services at first. The pay was tiny, but the experience was valuable. The first time someone paid her for her work, she stared at the screen in disbelief. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was proof that her effort meant something. She didn't cry that day. She smiled. With each small success, the voice of doubt grew quieter. The girl who once believed she was weak began to see strength in herself. Opportunities expanded. More clients trusted her. Her skills improved. She saved every bit of money she earned, determined to build a better future. Meanwhile, people in her town began to notice changes. The quiet girl who once walked with lowered eyes now carried herself with quiet confidence. But the biggest change was invisible. The tears had stopped. Not because life had become perfect, but because Amina had learned that her energy was more powerful when used to build rather than to mourn. Years later, she would look back on that evening by the window as the turning point of her life. It was the day she stopped crying. And the day she started conquering. Not conquering others, but conquering fear, doubt, and the belief that her story was already written. Her journey would still include struggles, setbacks, and moments of uncertainty. But she had discovered something stronger than sadness. She had discovered her own power. And once a person discovers that, the world can never make them small again.